In episode 2, when Ted shows up at the office that day, he's surprised because not only is he greeted by the normal Leslie and also Rebecca, but Keeley's there. That's a pleasant surprise. And Trent Crimm. Trent has approached everybody about the idea of following the team around for a book. While they told Trent that it's ultimately Ted's choice, it's pretty clear that no one thinks it's a good idea. They kind of all give Ted a look like, please God, don't say yes. And he says yes. Shortly after welcoming Trent, big news hits the soccer world as a guy named Zava is now a free agent. He's leaving Juventus. Zava is a bit of a diva. The guy's been on 14 teams in 15 years. He's also extremely expensive, but he's the kind of game changer that every club should be looking for. And Rebecca doesn't really seem interested in dealing with that drama until she finds out that Rupert and West Ham will absolutely be interested. When she hears that, she is all for getting getting Zava. And the fact that Rebecca now wants Zava because Rupert wants him is something that Trent Crimm really respects. Once they leave Rebecca's office, Ted is able to speak to Keeley about her new business venture. And Keeley tells him that it's going well, but she's having problems integrating herself to her new coworkers. Everybody seems super stiff. Barbara in particular. Ted suggests that she find something to do with these people outside of work, and she thinks that's a great idea. As she's trying to leave, she runs into Isaac, who wants a shoe deal, and then she runs into Jamie. The two quickly get caught up, and then Keeley makes her way over to Roy, who's got some things from his place that he needs to give her. As this conversation is happening out of earshot, Isaac notices the two must have broken up. Body language is there. And the fact that Roy and Keeley broke up definitely piques the interest of Jamie, who still has never given up hope that maybe he and Keeley can one day rekindle their relationship. But first, Jamie needs to confirm that Roy and Keeley broke up, so he pulls Roy into an office and says, "Did you guys break up? Is it true?" And Roy confirms it, but what really comes as a surprise is the fact that he was the one who initiated the end of the relationship. He wasn't dumped. He was the dumper. He also really doesn't want to talk about it. While Roy and Jamie were having this conversation, over in Ted's office, he was discussing Zava with Coach Beard. And Coach Beard thinks it's a no-brainer to get him. But then they hear a commotion out in the locker room. When they go to check on it, Sam says, "We just heard the most upsetting rumor." And Ted says, "Is this about us getting Zava?" And that's not upsetting at all. That excites everybody in the room. Ted restores order by saying, "Okay, if you weren't talking about Zava, is this about Trent Crimm writing a book?" And they had no idea about that. The rumor that they found upsetting was the fact that Roy broke up with Keeley. Everybody liked that relationship. Even Ted is completely shocked by this. Shortly after Ted almost faints from hearing the news, Roy walks in and he immediately blames Jamie because he thinks that Jamie told everybody. But Jamie said, "No, I didn't tell a soul. I just came in and they were talking about us getting Zava." And that distracts Roy completely, who is all for the team going and getting Zava, even though he's crazy. Ted then tries to get the conversation of why the relationship ended, but Trent walks in with Leslie and Roy shuts down. He's not willing to discuss anything in front of Trent. And he tells the entire team, "No one says a word around this guy unless you want my forehead through your skull." And at that threat, everybody quiets up around Trent. The other side of this breakup, though, Keeley headed off to a music video for one of her clients, where she gets rekindled with one of her good friends, Shandy. They get caught up pretty quickly, but then Shandy gives a suggestion to the director of the music video that they're working on, and it's a really good suggestion. Keeley loves Shandy, and it's a good suggestion. She decides, you know what, you should come work for KJPR. The problem comes when Barbara, her CFO, finds out about this hiring. She's very dismissive of the fact that Shandy has no experience whatsoever, and she feels like Keeley is simply hiring her because they're friends. And Keeley does not like the way that Barbara treated Shandy. So she goes and confronts her about it, saying that it's completely inexcusable. She gets distracted, though, when she sees the snow globe collection that Barbara has. And Barbara mentions that she gets a snow globe from every place she's ever worked. And she's worked at a lot of different places. Probably because her attitude sucks. Keeley then gets back on track, telling Barbara that she cannot speak to people in a dismissive tone just because she feels like they're not qualified. She's not rude about it. She just wants to hammer home the point that at KJPR, Barbara needs to treat people with respect. And Barbara does that by coming up with an official title for Shandy. While that work relationship was getting mended, the work relationship between Trent Crimm, who's just trying to write a book, and Roy is still on the rocks. Trent is actually put in an office with Roy, but Roy is very disruptive and still has no interest whatsoever of talking to him about anything, and he has no interest in squashing whatever beef the two have with each other. And it's really just one-sided beef, because Trent has no problem with Roy, but Roy clearly has a problem with Trent. But since Roy put that edict to the team, they've heeded it. No one talks around Trent Crimm, making his work nearly impossible to complete. As for the actual Richmond team, they're preparing for their season opener against Chelsea. And Rebecca gets great news. Zava is planning to sign with Chelsea. It's great news because he has flat out said, I'm not signing with West Ham, I'm signing with Chelsea. And that's all that Rebecca really cares about. While she would like to have Zava as a Greyhound, ultimately, her main goal is to just make sure Rupert doesn't get him. So she heads to Chelsea's pitch in a great mood. She's in an owner's box, she's hanging out with Keeley. This game's also sort of homecoming for Roy Kent, who played years for Chelsea and is beloved by the fan base. And this is the first time he's coming back to the pitch. He's greeted with a huge ovation. But the guy who gets the biggest ovation is Zava, who shows up and is watching it from a suite. It's distracting not only to the fans, but to the players as well, because the Richmond team still thinks that they have a shot of getting him. And maybe it's the Zava distraction that leads to the Greyhounds losing 1-0 at the half. Halftime is where things start to go south. Rebecca looks to her right and sees Rupert talking to Zava, and that's when she starts to panic, because she knows how convincing Rupert can be. She remembers being wooed by him back when she was just a bartender. She knows that if Rupert really wants Zava and is able to get him one-on-one, like he currently has him, there's a pretty good chance that Zava changes his mind. She's not ready to just let Rupert take this guy from her, so she gets up from her seat and tries to make her way to his suite. But she gets stopped by security, and that's when she sees Rupert, who forgot something in the suite. They start trading the most subtle, petty insults, and it's Rupert's who hurt the most. She also gets shut down by Zava. When he walks out of the suite, she introduces himself, but he flat out says, yeah, I'm not signing with you guys. But Rebecca still isn't willing to give up and let Rupert win. She follows Zava into the bathroom, and as this guy is taking a piss, she reams him out, saying that he's being a little bitch. Signing with West Ham, that's easy. But he's clearly not as good as he thinks he is, because if he was, he would sign with Richmond and cement a legacy. She insults him, she calls him overrated, a chicken, and then just has a mic drop and walks out, leaving Zava with a lot to think about, because nobody comes at Zava's ego like that. And while Rebecca was insulting the number one free agent, Ted was trying to motivate his guys, but that's really hard to do because every time Trent Crimm enters the locker room, everybody gets quiet, and Ted can't work like this. He pulls Roy aside and gets real serious with him, telling him, I don't know what your beef is with Trent, but I'm going to need you to squash it right now, because your ego is about to sabotage a whole lot more than a stupid football match. So Roy calls Trent into the showers where they can speak privately, and he pulls out an old newspaper article from years ago. It's from when Roy made his Premier League debut, when he was just 17 years old. And Trent Crimm wrote that he was overrated, overhyped, and already a disappointment. And it hurt Roy to the core. It ate at him so much that he kept that article in his wallet for years. He never forgave Trent for the nasty words that he said after this kid just had his dream come true, only to be dashed by some stupid journalist. And Trent owns up to it, saying, look, I was young in my career and I was trying to make a name for myself by being edgy. He apologized to Roy, the two squashed the beef, and when they walk out of the room, Roy announced to the entire team, okay, you can talk around him now, and they start strategizing about how they're going to beat Chelsea. They end up going out in the second half and tying, leaving Chelsea with a point. But Chelsea doesn't care because after the match, they're hosting a press conference where they're hoping to announce the newest signing, Zava. Although Zava shocks the entire football world by announcing that he is not signing with Chelsea, he has changed his mind, and he is now signing with Richmond. Everybody in the Richmond locker room is thrilled about the news. They're more excited about this than actually tying the match. As they're leaving, though, Ted, Roy, and Trent all have a conversation about what it was like for Roy to be back at Chelsea. And while you would think that it would be great to get an ovation like that, it was sad for him because he remembers his last match with Chelsea. He remembers what it felt like to know at that moment he no longer had it. He didn't want to be one of those broken down players just taking up space because of legendary status. So going back there today, there's a slight part of him that wonders maybe he should have stayed and enjoyed himself. But he tells Ted, that's just not who I am. And Ted says, well, not yet. I mean, think of the bright side. If you didn't leave Chelsea when you did, we never would have met. And that does elicit a bit of a smile from Roy. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry. It'll be up in a day or two.